Shalom. This is my special edition of Antisemitism Year in Review. I am going to look at my top 10 list over the next 2 weeks. But first, would you consider subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and giving us a thumbs up? It really helps. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Shalom and thank you. So first one is January 2021, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'm going to go over the important milestones of the last year. International Holocaust Remembrance Day is different from Yom HaShoah, known as the Day of the Catastrophe, which falls annually a week after Passover in Israel, and that started in 1953, just about a decade after the war. Each year on January 27, the international community remembers the Holocaust in various ways, from synagogue services to vigils to educational events that include Holocaust survivors or scholars, or both. Survivors have dwindled down to a few thousand globally. Considering that anybody born at the onset of the war in 1939 would be 83 years old today, most survivors of the Holocaust are in their late early or late 90s or older. So let's look at a few things that we can do to remember the Holocaust. It's coming around the corner next month anyway. One thing you can do is listen to a Holocaust survivor. The powerful work of the staff at the Holocaust and Antisemitism Foundation brings many testimonies from survivors on video, and by virtue of that medium, renders their unique stories eternal. Additionally, the Steven Spielberg Shoah Foundation has over 55,000 video testimonies of survivors that are there to stay. Every single one of them is poignant and memorable in its own way. So visit those sites. I'll put the sites in the description below. Or you can visit a death camp. Walking alongside the one-way train tracks through the eerie empty barracks and on the death camp grounds will leave an indelible mark on your memory. The death camps are gruesome monuments from one of the darkest periods of mankind's history. If at all possible, everybody, and most definitely every Christian, should walk through one of these once in their lifetime. I did that in 2010 when I went to Auschwitz. I recommend it. It's not a happy thing, but it must be done. Or you can also visit a Holocaust Memorial Museum. There are several Holocaust Memorial Museums in the United States. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., or the Simon Wiesenthal Center Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles are just two of the most impactful and fruitful in their respective communities and nationally, actually, on a national level. This list is much longer and warrants several different visits if possible. That's a good thing you can do. But if you can't do any of those, what you can do is read an account of the Holocaust. From survivors' accounts to biographies, historical account, and even poems. The choices are many. Every human being should read the short but life-altering account of Elie Wiesel's time at Auschwitz-Birkenau, retold in his book, Night, the story of resilience and survival against all odds. A detailed and accurate account of the Holocaust can be also found in Lucy Davidowitz' The War Against the Jews, and in The Destruction of the European Jews by Raoul Hilberg. If you're not a reader, you can also watch Schindler's List. Those are all examples of what you can do to remember the Holocaust. And it's an ongoing thing. It's not just do it once in your lifetime. Many of those things you can do every year. But it is our duty as human beings to remember the Holocaust, retell its history to the current and future generations, and resist anti-Semitism by speaking up against those who deny that it ever happened. Don't rely on others to remember the uniqueness of the Holocaust. Don't wait for someone else to come alongside or speak up in your place. Speak up and remember, because it is the right thing to do, and not only on January 27th of every year, but throughout the year. Next, in February, I talked about COVID-19 and the Jews. COVID-19 is a real thing. It's a real virus, and it's a tragedy. I mean, people we all know that have passed from it. But here are some facts that I gathered. 20% of all English people believe that the Jews created COVID-19. As people were surveyed according to the Oxford Coronavirus Explanations, Attitudes, and Narrative Survey, presented with the statement, Jews have created the virus to collapse the economy for financial gain, 5.3% of the interviewees agreed a little, 6.8% agreed moderately, and 4.6% agreed a lot. Even 2.4% agreed completely. So that's quite a few. Well, some 81% did not agree with it at all, but 20% agreed. It's crazy when you think about it. People accuse the Jews of using the vaccine to control the world population. The CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, is a Greek man of Jewish ancestry. This is enough for crazy conspiracy theorists to claim that the Jews created the vaccine and will use it to streamline the world population and control the world. This is in line with the same theories advanced in a 1904 hoax known as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's crazy. A man in Ohio, actually several men, accused Jews of being the real plague. During a street protest in Columbus, Ohio against COVID-19, the restrictions, two men displayed a sign of a rat looking like a Jew with an Israeli flag. The sign also said, "The real plague." This is strongly reminiscent of the accusations against the Jewish community during the Black Plague of 1348 through 51, when Jews were accused of poisoning the wells of Europe simply because of the smaller number of Jewish casualties due to kosher laws and liturgical hygiene. But people don't look at the facts. Social networks abound with anti-Semitic memes about the Jews either being or controlling the virus. Vicious attacks on Jewish people and on Israel are everywhere on the social networks, and most of them are not being censored because of the First Amendment. I am all for claiming freedom of speech as long as we are consistent and do not allow for double standards. Unfortunately, this is far from being the case when it comes to Jewish people. Part of the squad, Rashida Tlaib, claims that Israel does not vaccinate Palestinians. She tweeted, and I quote, "It's really important to understand that Israel is a racist state in that they would deny Palestinians like my grandmother access to a vaccine that they don't believe she is an equal human being who deserves to live." The opposite is true. Israel has offered vaccines to Palestinians and many have accepted them. The Palestinian Authority also refused a recent load of vaccines simply because they were coming from the United Arab Emirates and they were coordinated for distribution by Israel. What a shame. Then one more. Under the COVID-19, Saturday Night Live comedian claims Israel only vaccinates Jews. On February 20th, SNL host Michael Che said, and I quote, "Israel is reporting that they've vaccinated half of their population, and I'm going to guess it's the Jewish half." It looks like using the blood libel to demonize the Jewish people is still in fashion. Incidentally, Michael Che has repeatedly insulted Jewish people before, but he's very careful not to denigrate other minorities. Entertainers have been fired for less than this. SNL used to be a funny, satirical comedy show, but that ship has sailed a long time ago. My next, which is number 3 on this first installment, well, I have 5 in the first video. Number 3 is March 2021. How Christian is Christian anti-Semitism? Can anti-Semitism be Christian, really? There is a recurring accusation, especially within Jewish circles, that the New Testament is anti-Semitic. The justification for such an accusation is found in 2,000 years of Jewish history that have been punctuated by a myriad of anti-Semitic acts throughout history. Many of them apparently rooted in Christianity and its teachings. So the question bears asking, how Christian is Christian anti-Semitism? Furthermore, is the New Testament anti-Semitic? So let's look at the New Testament briefly. First thing we need to realize is that the New Testament is a very Jewish book. From the very first words of the first book in the New Testament, everything is Jewish as it records the genealogy of the Jewish Messiah. You open the New Testament, this is what you read. The record of the genealogy of the Yeshua, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. That's Matthew 1, verses 1 and 2. The audience is Jewish. The writers are Jewish, Luke being the possible exception. The context is Jewish. The culture is Jewish. And much of the geography is Jewish. As a matter of fact, it is nearly impossible to fully understand the richness of the New Testament without reading it from a Jewish context. Most believers spend their whole life reading the Bible in black and white until they look at the Jewish perspective, and all of a sudden, the same story appears in color and HD. Now, don't quote me wrong. Reading our Bible is vital, even when it is not done with an understanding of its Jewish backdrop, but it is greatly enhanced once we look at the Word of God through Jewish eyes. Under this same topic, the New Testament uses strong language. That is true. We can't deny that. How do we reconcile words like, quote, unquote, the synagogue of Satan, as seen in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, or your father the devil in John 8:44, or even you brood of vipers in Matthew 3:7. They are indeed very strong words directed at Jewish people. Can't deny that. Those accusatory words were definitely used in the New Testament to describe the hypocrisy and sin of some of the Jewish leaders contemporary to Yeshua. They were accurate words, to be sure, but what has been missed and has led to so much damage is the fact that they were used to denounce people who happened to be disobedient sinners first and Jewish second. Their ethnicity did not play a role in their guilt. This is what we call the Great Christian Departure. The church started to attach the sins of early Jewish believers to their non-related Jewishness, and before long, being Jewish became a crime. Now, the Old Testament also uses strong language. Why is it that when similar language is used to describe the disobedience of Israel in the Jewish law and the prophets, the Jewish Bible, nobody, especially in the Jewish community, has a problem with any of it? In Deuteronomy 9:7, Moses calls the Jewish people rebellious. Is he anti-Semitic? In Deuteronomy 9:13, God calls the Jewish people stubborn and wants to kill them all. Is God anti-Semitic? Nonsense. Ezekiel calls Israel stubborn and obstinate in Ezekiel 3:7. The descriptions are perfectly in line with the actions of the children of Israel described all throughout the Tanakh. And they are no different than those of the New Testament, except that they come from the Jewish scriptures prior to Yeshua's first coming, and somehow that makes them acceptable. Do you see a double standard here? I do. One more thing under this topic. The Jews did not kill Christ. The most common accusation against the Jewish people that continues to this day is that of deicide, the killing of God. We know that God cannot die, but that doesn't stop people from calling it that. Jews the world over continue to be called Christ killers by Christians and non-Christians alike. There are two problems with that accusation. First, even if some Jewish people were guilty of the crucifixion of Yeshua, and they're not, but if some were, it would never make sense to paint with broad strokes and render all Jews of all time guilty of the same crime. By the same logic, all Germans would be Nazis and all Muslims would be terrorists. This makes no sense at all. This is ludicrous. However, and more importantly, Yeshua gave his own life in obedience to the Father, as we read in John 10:17 and 18. For this, and I quote, "For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it again. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I receive from my Father," close quote. So in reality, We all are sharing the guilt without exception. We all killed Messiah. If anybody did, we all did. Finally, context is everything. Very important. The very fact that many early Christians took the scriptures out of context and allegorized much of them does not make the New Testament anti-Semitic. It simply makes it misinterpreted and misapplied. Can Christians be anti-Semitic? I think that history speaks clearly on that matter. Yes, they can. But are they anti-Semitic because they follow the teachings of Yeshua of Nazareth? Absolutely not. 2,000 years of scripture twisting to accommodate and justify human behavior against the Jews have left a bloody stain on mankind in general and on the Christian church in particular. But it is not based on anything taught in the Bible. So is it fair to say that Christian anti-Semitism is not Christian at all? If one takes the Bible literally, all have sinned and fell short of the glory of God. That's in Romans 3:23. All means Jews and non-Jews alike, with no exceptions. Christian anti-Semitism is simply anti-Semitism committed by Christians who read their Bible improperly and use it as an excuse to ostracize and demonize the Jewish people. The Christians who paint with broad strokes the Jewish people as a subhuman group are as guilty as the Jewish people who claim that all Christians are anti-Semitic. And so is the New Testament. The New Testament is not anti-Semitic. It's time to keep things in context and approach God's Word in context as well, with humility and sincerity. The next topic, number 4, in April 2021, I wrote an article titled "A New U.S. Assistant Secretary of State with Ties to Hamas. What could possibly go wrong?" Crazy when you think about it. He's still in office. So, even though the current U.S. administration vows that they seek Israel's safety, they have shown no interest in dealing with the Middle East as a priority and have made Hadi Amar the new Deputy Assistant Secretary for Israel and Palestinian Affairs. He is the highest U.S. ranking official for Middle East affairs. The question is, does he have the credentials for such a task? Or is he biased? Well, consider this. Hadi Amir is a practicing Muslim. Now, this is not an issue in and of itself. As freedom of religion is part of our Constitution, rightfully so, but might not be the best choice for the person officially representing the U.S. government in the Middle East. Hadi Amir wrote that he was inspired by the Palestinian Intifada. The Intifada, meaning the uprising, was organized unrest from Palestinians against Israel based on a false premise that Israel is an occupier and colonizer and trying to push Palestinians out of their own ancestral land. There is no archaeological, geographical, or historical basis for such a claim. Hadi Amir has repeatedly called for dealing with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization with a charter calling for the complete destruction of Israel. You heard me, the complete destruction of Israel. Hadi Amir wants to deal with Hamas, wants to dialogue with Hamas. Seriously? Hadi Amir has been instrumental in resuming U.S. funding of the Palestinian Authority. One of the first items on his agenda has been to restore U.S. funding to the Palestinian Authority, and U.S. taxpayers are now forced to fund terrorism again. Additionally, Hadi Amir has strong ties to Qatar. He lived and worked there for years, establishing a branch of the Brookings Institute there. Qatar is notorious for funding terrorism and supporting Hamas and having ties with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Hadi Amir also has accused Israel of murdering innocent children. He wrote, and I quote, "Arabs will never forget what the Israeli people, the Israeli military, and Israeli democracy have done to Palestinian children, and there will be thousands who will seek to avenge these brutal murders of innocents," close quote. Hadi Amir has accused Israel of ethnic cleansings. He continues to promote the false narrative that Israel has taken over Palestinian land and has committed ethnic cleansing, when in fact there are more Arabs in Israel today than there were prior to 1948, which, in my book, and anybody in their right mind, in their book, should be the opposite of ethnic cleansing. And finally, for this last one for this episode, May 2021, do Jewish lives matter only in theory? Tragic story that I reported in May, which was the end of something that took place in 2017. On April 4th, 2017, a 65-year-old Sarah Halimi, a retired doctor, was tortured by her neighbor Kolibi Traore and then thrown to her death from the window of her third-floor apartment. Traore committed the murder while reciting verses from the Quran and calling Sarah Halimi a dirty Jew. Upon throwing her through the window, Traore shouted in Arabic that he had succeeded in killing an evil spirit or killed the Satan. Now, tragic murder. When questioned, Traore declared that he felt persecuted, and after realizing that he was high on marijuana, the French justice system decided that he would not stand trial. That decision basically sent the message that anyone's voluntary drug consumption exonerates them from any responsibility, even in the case of a murder. Traore was officially acquitted in April of 2021 and is literally getting away with murder, while the global media, for the most part, completely ignored the story. French President Emmanuel Macron said that the Jewish community has his full support. Really? What did he mean by that? Were these empty words to save face? Is it not the first time that it's not the first time that Jewish people have been killed in France in recent years? What about the multiple stabbings of Holocaust survivor Mireille Knoll in 2018? Left her dying in a burning apartment. Of course, we all remember the kosher supermarket carnage of January 2015, when 4 Jewish shoppers were murdered. That was 6 years ago. The site of the tragedy, just a stone throw from the house where I grew up, continues to see flowers and photos brought in memory of the victims. That's very thoughtful, but you cannot fight terrorism and anti-Semitism with flowers, photos, and poems and candles. You need to do more than that. It would appear that the lives of Jewish people are not worth much. Incidentally, France is a country where people will get up to 1 year in prison if they are found guilty of throwing their dog out the window. So, is the life of a dog more than the life of a Jewish person? Well, it would appear so. This can only encourage anti-Semitism or anti-Semites to perpetrate more crimes against Jews, as they see that their actions, if noticed and if reported properly, might not even garner any punishment. Justice is usually served, but maybe not for Jews after all. At least not for the foreseeable future in France. This is despicable and very scary for the Jewish community of France. That community already does not report all anti-Semitic acts, because very little, if anything, gets done when they do. Sometimes Jews even get accused of playing the victim card or calling any disagreement with the Jewish community anti-Semitism. There might have been some abuse in that area, but throwing a Jewish woman through the third-floor window screaming Allah Akbar and I have killed the Satan is anti-Semitism without a doubt, no matter which way you look at it. So do Jewish lives matter? Well, it certainly looks like they don't in France. Now, in every situation, there are always going to be the perpetrators, the victims, and the bystanders. In the case of Sarah Halimi, the victim, and Kolibi Traore, the perpetrator, inevitably there are some bystanders. People who are not Jewish, people who fear Islamic repercussions, and people guilty of soft anti-Semitism who wouldn't kill Jewish people but certainly don't care if someone else does. If you don't see the beginning wave of a repeat of history in Europe, you're not really paying attention. The last time a Jewish life was worth nothing, we let an evil man and his cohorts decimate 6 million Jews in the most horrific, systematic way possible. One of those Jews was my maternal grandfather. I have much more, but I will keep it for the next episode. So tune in next week for part 2 of my top 10 list of acts of antisemitism in 2021. Until then, shalom. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.